Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome all to our session that is called People's Climate Commitment or Glasgow Agreement, which is being organized by Climáximo, which is a Portuguese organization. And I hope you are enjoying the Global Just Recovery Gathering and all the amazing sessions. And yeah, thank you for coming to this session because I know that there are a lot of sessions happening at the same time. And yeah, I wanted to, I'm seeing that a lot of people are like writing on the chat where they are from. If you want to rename yourself to put the place where you are from, I encourage you to do that. My name is Alice and I'm from Portugal, and I'm going to be hosting this session. And yeah, if you want to turn on your cameras, you're welcome to, so we can all see each other. If you don't feel comfortable to turn on your cameras, is also perfectly fine. Just be aware that this session is being recorded. So if you don't feel comfortable with that, don't turn on your cameras. And if you do, please turn on your cameras. And yeah, I will try to speak a little bit slower now because there are a lot of people here that might not be really comfortable with English. And if you have trouble understanding what the speakers are saying, you can just write in the chat for us to slow down. And also, please mute your microphones while you are not speaking to pose a question, so that like everything goes fine with the sound and that we all understand each other. And yeah, so also I just wanted to for you to keep in mind that neither of us is really fluent in English, so please be patient if you don't like, if it's not really perfect. And also, without further ado, I'm going to show you who is going to speak. So we have Matilde from FFF Portugal, which is going to be one of the speakers. And FFF Portugal is an organization that signed the Glasgow Agreement. We also have Jawad from ATTAC Morocco, which also signed the Glasgow Agreement and is also going to be a speaker. And last but not least, we have Alejandra from Alianza Mexicana contra Fracking, which also signed the Glasgow Agreement and will also be a speaker. And yeah, welcome to everyone that is joining now. About the agenda, we are going to speak a little bit about why did the Glasgow Agreement come up. So what was the initial reasoning for this? We're going to talk about the key concepts on the Glasgow Agreement, so climate justice and civil disobedience. We're going to talk about what is our plan, so a little bit about inventories and the climate justice agenda, which will explain what it is. And going to give the Portuguese example of the inventory. And finally, we're going to talk about the current status and the next steps for the Glasgow Agreement. We will have some time for questions at the end, around 20 minutes. So I'm going to remind you of this later on, but if you want to pose a question speaking, you just have to put a star on the chat like this, and I'll give you the words to speak. Or if you are not comfortable speaking, you can just write the question on the chat and I will read it. And yeah, if you have a really important question during the presentation, you can ask that question, or a really important, yeah. But I will ask you to keep other questions and comments for the end, so just that the speakers don't get confused during the presentation. And yeah, I think this is pretty much it. and we'll start. So if you want to move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. I'll start with the initial reasoning. So why the Glasgow Agreement? So speaking from my experience, in Portugal, we went to the COP25 in Madrid in 2019. And I had never been on an international protest of the climate justice movement. So I was so happy and so excited to see so many people on the streets demanding climate justice and to see the potential that our movement has to build a better future. But coming back from COP, I couldn't help to feel disappointed, to think, whoa, 25 COPs and nothing has changed. Our house is still on fire and the flames are going wilder. 25 years of COPs have resulted in various numbers of failed agreements and market tools to show that something is being done while postponing real action. Institutions are failing, and they were meant to fail, to keep the business as usual of the climate and social degradation. We, the climate justice movement, want to fight the fire. And while I was at the Counter COP, I saw for the first time our potential to do this. But we also realized that we need different tools to set up and win. And this is the initial reasoning behind the Glasgow Agreement. And yeah, I'll pass on the word to Jawad to talk about what is the Glasgow Agreement. And if you want to move on to the next slide, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Alice. Can you hear me? Good. So thank you, Alice. Before getting to my presentation, I think let me just start by saying that I'm really happy to be part of this session and participate in the Just Recovery gathering. I attended some panels yesterday and I really enjoyed it, and I can feel the vibe and the energy, despite that it's virtual and despite the restriction imposed by the COVID pandemic. Okay, so I will try to go through the key concepts that we adopted in Glasgow Agreement. So the first one is climate justice. So climate justice for us is not only a declaration, is actually a political framework that is driving all our plans and actions. So the inventory are made based on climate justice. The action plan is also made based on climate justice. So this is very important for us. And the way we are understanding climate justice and its definition was actually built following many discussions among many organizations. Those discussions was closed in October 2020. So I will try to go through some of the main principles and key concepts, and I think Matilde, Alice, and Alejandra can say how it was difficult for me to make a choice because I wanted to put everything in that. So, but I made the choices, maybe not the best ones. Can you go to the next, please? So the first principle and key concept that we consider is the interdependence of all species. And I think that the current catastrophic pandemic reminds us how actually our lives is depending on all other forms of life, and how the fact that we are keeping destroying ecosystems and breaking life cycles can have a catastrophic impact on us. So this is really important, and we really believe in that. The second one is recovery of indigenous knowledges. So we do believe that in order to fix the ecological crisis created by the capitalist extractivist system and post system, we need to acknowledge other form of knowledge. And we do believe that Western capitalist culture hegemony is just, or the way, or science actually is just one form of knowledge, and there is so many other forms of knowledge and that have been developed by people through centuries, and especially indigenous people. So we have so much to learn actually from those indigenous and those forms of knowledge, how to live together and how to interact with other forms of life. We also believe that the economy must be democratically planned based on real needs and local community sovereignty. This is also important. We believe that local community sovereignty and not capital or profit sovereignty. And so this is very, very important to consider, and we are considering this as a key. And of course, we believe that food sovereignty and energy sovereignty is a key to fix or to overcome the current crisis. We also believe that we refuse, actually, this is also important, we refuse the green capitalism and all market-based solution, because it's not working. And I think at least since Kyoto Agreement, it's like 25 years or 30 years now, we can say today that all those market-based solutions that have been proposed as a magic solution to fix everything, the carbon market, the carbon credit, the clean mechanism of development, we can say today that it's not working, and it's failed to reduce greenhouse gases, that it never stopped to rise. But for us, it's not only that. We refuse green capitalism because actually it's deepening the other form of injustices that we already facing, the social injustice, the economic injustice, and the cultural injustice. And maybe I can give an example from my country, Morocco, where we have developed one of the largest CSP concentrated solar power plants in the world, in the south, in Ouarzazate. And of course, we need this form of energy, we need solar energy, but unfortunately, those projects was made with the same colonized and colonizing mindset, where we had land grabbing, we had also a complete marginalizing of local communities and their knowledge also. And we had even technical issues because we didn't listen to local communities, and we completely marginalized them. So we refuse that, and we think we cannot fix those issues while creating and deepening other form of injustice. We, of course, we refuse this mindset, and namely the oppression, the imposition, and the competition that it's unfortunately ruling our world today. And we advocate for more cooperation, more solidarity, and mutual aid. And again, the current pandemic reminds us how solidarity is important. Unfortunately, it's not the case today, and the rulers and those who are ruling the world, they are in another approach, very egoistic, very racist approach, which is failed also to overcome the ongoing health crisis. We also call for acknowledgement of ecological and historical debt, and we call for its reparation, and most important, stop of its origins, which is neocolonialism. Neocolonialism using the debt mechanism, the financial debt mechanism. So we call to stop that and recognize the historical colonial debt that global North owes to global South. We support structural changes to redress centuries of systemic racism, colonialism, and imperialism. And finally, and these are, for me, it's very important, we support a just transition for workers and local communities. What that means? It means that we cannot decarbonize our economy and our way of living without a real, concrete involvement of workers, local communities, and users. Workers of the facilities that we wanna shut down or dismantle or reuse, because this is one of our objectives. And we can, and those workers who are actually the first victims of those polluting facilities, and local communities who are living around this or impacted by those facilities, and also the users, they should not be only involved in the implementation of those so-called solution, like renewable or whatever. They should be involved actually in the design of those solutions. And I really believe that we have so much to learn from workers of those facilities and local communities. So I still have 2 minutes. I have to go. So next, please. Of course, for this, we have a plan. So Glasgow Agreement is not just a declaration. We are not a think tank. It's just not a words. We have a plan, and it's an action-oriented agreement. And one of the main tools that we adopted is civil disobedience and direct action to stop actually those facilities, because we do believe that, as Martin Luther King said, disobey the rulers, disobey the corporation and the governments today is a duty to heal our world and our people. And thank you. I hope that I respected the time.
Yeah, thanks, Jawad. Maybe you can pass on to the next slide, please. Yeah, so Jawad just explained the what. So what are our key concepts that we work with? What are our frameworks? And now I want to speak a little bit about the how. So what's the plan? What tools will we develop? So as Jawad said, Glasgow Agreement is not only a written text that was signed by many organizations. It is an action-oriented plan that proposes very concrete tools for the climate justice movement to move forward and to achieve a 50% emissions cut globally by 2030 within the framework of climate justice. And how can we do this? So, as already explained, organizations in the Glasgow Agreement commit to taking into their own hands the need to collectively cut greenhouse gas emissions and keep fossil fuels in the ground. To do this, we will develop 2 important tools, the inventory and the climate justice agendas. I will talk about now the inventory, and Alejandra will then continue to present the climate justice agenda. So when organizations sign the Glasgow Agreement, they commit to the production of an inventory of the main sectors, infrastructures, and future projects responsible for the emissions of greenhouse gas emissions in each territory. These inventories will be nationally and also internationally publicized. The point is to have clear and accessible information of the disaggregated emissions of a territory. And what's the logic behind disaggregated emissions inventory? What makes this inventory so different? So usually official data, when it exists, presents the territory's emissions by sector. For example, 30% of the emissions is from the energy sector, 20% of the emissions of the country is from transportation, and so on.
And this means that most of the time, it is not possible for groups to have a really clear picture of where those emissions are actually being produced. So the inventory aims to gather the existing data and disaggregate it, having as a result a very concrete, accessible, and easy to understand list of the top emitters in the country. So which infrastructures are polluting, where are they, who's the company behind it, and who's financing that fire. The inventory also has a section for new projects that will rise emissions. And we also know for sure that there is no room for new projects of fossil fuel explorations. So based on this much more focused information, the inventory will then become a political tool, as the Glasgow Agreement groups will decide the criteria for emission cuts based on current science, capacity, and historical responsibility. Groups can then build effective action plans, inform on their inventories, taking into account the required cuts as well as local community needs, and always inside the framework of climate justice that Jawad just explained. So to sum up, the inventory is an X-ray of the territory that helps us understand better our reality, knowing exactly who and where are the big polluters, and acting collectively at the local and international level to target them. And because this might seem a little bit abstract at first, I will show you one part of the inventory of Portugal, which Fridays for Future Portugal and Climáximo built together in the past few months. Keep in mind that this is just a part of the inventory report that we produced. It is just an image, but I will show you so it's not that abstract. You can pass the slide. So this is one picture of the inventory of Portugal. We now have the list of the top 248 most emitting infrastructures in the country. This is one of the first inventories being finished, but there are already others finished or almost there. So this is just an example. And also, as I already said, keep in mind that this is only a very brief and partial summary of the extended inventory reports that we produced. So in this picture, we have the top infrastructures organized by sector. In this big ball, there are 248 dots. Each dot in this big ball of dots corresponds to one infrastructure. The bigger the dot, the more emissions it is responsible for. The color indicates the sector it belongs to. So you can see like red, energy, dark green, waste, yellow, industry, blue, transportation, and then green, light green, agriculture, and forestry. So you can immediately notice that the red dots corresponding to the energy sector are the most present ones. You can also see that there's a lot of yellow and green ones representing the industry and agriculture and forestry sectors, respectively. One thing that also immediately comes to your mind is that you can also immediately identify a huge, disproportionately large infrastructure in the middle of the image, represented by that huge, big red dot, and it belongs to the energy sector. Just for curiosity, that dot stands for the #1 emitter in our country, which is a fossil fuel refinery in Sines, belonging to the Galp company. So this is a part of the inventory, and it's just a practical example of what the Glasgow Agreement inventory can look like. We need to recognize that this powerful tool might seem and sound a little bit hard for groups whose focus is not so much on the technical skills. However, that is not a problem, as there are already guides on how to do it and a global Glasgow Agreement inventory and climate agenda support group that is always available to help groups in the search for information, methodology, and revising. We also need to recognize that in many countries of the world, it is not easy to access these types of data, and sometimes they don't even exist. That is not a problem in the sense that they can produce an inventory based on the available information and focus then on the building of the climate justice agenda. And last but not least, it does not end here. So the inventory is the first tool built by Glasgow Agreement groups, but informed by it will have the climate justice agenda, which Alejandra will now explain. And I think you can pass the slides.
Thanks,
also.
Matilde. And well, first, I appreciate the invitation to participate in this forum for action on the most important problem in current history. I quickly introduce myself. I'm Alejandra from Mexico. I'm territory and human rights defender. I'm part of the Mexican Alliance Against Fracking, Alianza Mexicana contra el Fracking, y de la Alianza Latinoamericana contra el Fracking, and also part of Glasgow Agreement. And now I will tell you about the climate and justice agendas, that what we hope and dream of them. To begin with, it should be said the climate agenda seeks collaboration with the grassroots social movement with its multiple sectors that, although they seem to be different, basically have many coincidences, especially when we talk about climate emergency. The climate justice agendas, after the production of the territorial inventories, say Matilde, we'll have a clearer and realistic idea to continue the building of a local, regional, or even national strategy to address the climate crisis. The climate justice agenda is an action plan for shutdown, reset, and transition. It will be discussed and designed by communities, movements, and organizations working on the ground. The climate agenda is our opportunity for weave ties with social movements. In this complexity, with indigenous communities, the women's movement, and with the movements of defense of the territory against extractivism that only benefits of the planet. These agendas are plural because each country or location could define with its priority for them. For some, the priority will be to address the emission of an oil plant, or others, perhaps mining or fracking or protecting water. The problem is so complex that a single agenda will be insufficient. We need multiple effort from all the places. Also, agendas are in majority local struggles, collective roots that are possible under the principles of collective organization, solidarity, and co-responsibility north-south. The construction of these agendas will be guided by climate justice, putting the life on the center. They will be our map of a world that builds alternatives with justice for all the living beings, from the most complex to the most tiny and simple. This construction of these agendas will be guided by climate justice and dialogue. Will reducing emissions is central. Agendas will need to consider social, historical, and political elements that have placed many at disadvantage. They will be our map of a world that builds alternatives with justice. Wait, yes, here. We will be our map of a world that builds alternatives with justice for all living beings, from the most complex to the most diminutive and simple. The climate agenda is an action plan for shutdown, reset, and transition designed by communities, movements, and organizations working on the ground. And I think that it's so with my part. And thanks.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, Alejandra, thank you. Can you hear me? Hello? Okay. Actually, our plan may seem like pretentious, because what we are intending to do is actually we wanna. I mean, we tend to succeed where governments fail, because this is what they were trying to do. I mean, they were pretending to try to do, like, try to cut emission for a long time, and they failed. So we are actually, we intend to cut those emission as per, because there is a climate urgency, and IPCC, the last report is saying that we have 8 years to do that. So we are, so yes, it's true. We have a very ambitious plan. And I think that, and we are relying more on the bottom, on the local communities to do that. And I think one of the lessons again of this pandemic and the way the rulers managed it, which was like a very catastrophic in my opinion, is that we cannot let them manage this. They don't know how to do it. They are too bad to manage such a global crisis, because they are very racist, they are very egoist. And I can give an example of vaccines and the way it's managed. But yeah, so this is very important. But even if we are very ambitious, we keep also very humble, and we know this humility is very important. And here I'm quoting one of our very known leftist economist and thinker, Mr. Aziz Blal, who is used to tell to his comrades, humility is a revolutionary virtue. And we really believe in that. And we know, and we are aware that we are in a learning process where we are collectively learning and trying to find ways to achieve our very ambitious objectives. And yeah, so we want just to say that we are very humble, even if we are very ambitious, and we rely and we count on every activist, every movements to join us, to help and to build together ways and tactics and strategies to tackle this very ambitious objective. And I will pass to Alice.
Thank you. And Andrew, yeah, thank you. So I saw that there are some questions and comments in the chat. Since we are almost done, I'll just end this part, and then we'll have like half an hour to answer to questions, because we were really efficient with time. So yeah, about what is currently happening in the Glasgow Agreement and what are the next steps. So we are currently finishing inventories. So yeah, there are several inventories being finished, and also starting to, sorry, I was going to answer a question, but never mind. And yeah, we're also starting to shape the climate justice agendas in regional contexts and territorial contexts. We are starting to build regional spaces, for instance, Latin America, Europe, Asian, etc. And we are going to have a global online conference in June or July. And there, in that global online conference, we are going to start to plan action moments that will act in accordance to the climate justice agendas. So this is basically a quick sum up of the overview of what is happening in the Glasgow Agreement. And thank you to all the speakers for the presentation, and thank you to Andrew about the slides passing. And maybe you can stop sharing the screen so we can all see. Oh yeah, So we could all see our faces right now, but then I'll probably ask you to share it again. So I don't know if it's better. But yeah, if you want to do a question, and I'll go back to the questions that that you already made in the chat. But if anyone else wants to do questions, you just need to put a star and then you can speak. Or if you don't want to speak, you can just write your question in the chat, and I'll read it and pass to one of our speakers to answer to your question. And yeah, so, whoa. Okay, so going back to the first question, which I believe it was from Wayne, about what access will you have at Glasgow to present your agenda. I don't know if maybe Matilde or Alejandra, you would like to answer to this question?
Yeah, I think I can answer that. We are currently talking to UK COP26 coalition to kind of sort that out. And so that's an ongoing conversation.
Okay, Wayne, do you feel like that you are clarified? Okay, if you want to speak, you can.
Yes, I can speak now.
Yeah.
Can you hear
sure.
me?
Yeah.
I understand it's a process, and it's not, and I hope that you can get an access so that you can present these ideas. I really like the notion of interdependence of all species. People lose track of the fact that we are not the only living being on the planet, and that all species are interconnected and are necessary for supporting each other. It's an excellent, excellent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I believe that next we had Aditi, who asked, what is your timeline on putting the inventories together? So yeah, I could also answer this, but I'm having fun passing the word to you. So.
Okay, so initially when the Glasgow Agreement was signed in October 2020, the idea was to have the inventories of the participating territories within, it was February, so around 4 months. So right now that most of those haven't been ready in February, some of them were in early March. But what we are doing is that when groups enter the Glasgow Agreement, what we are doing is that when a group enters the Glasgow Agreement, if there are any other groups from their territory, they join the ongoing process of building the inventory. And if they're the first ones, then they start the inventory with, no rush and the support of the Global Working Group.
Okay, thank you. So next we had Dan, who wanted to speak. So please go ahead.
Oh, hi, everybody. Hi, thank you for that. That was a great presentation and really compelling, I thought, way of presenting the data. But I just had a question for all the panelists of, with the having identified these big sources of emissions in a market, what do you see as the most effective tactics for targeting them?
Jawad, do you want to answer to this question?
I think it was cut, so I didn't answer the. I didn't really hear it very well. So can you summarize for me? Alice? Yeah, or Dan, you can do it also.
Go ahead, Dan. Oh, is Dan here? I think Dan fell off the call. I don't know if this expression is used in English, but so maybe I'll get back to Dan when he rejoins. So skipping then to come back to Dan's question afterwards, So João asked if there is a Brazil inventory. If you want to.
It's right now being built, but it's still very in an early stage. So if you are based in Brazil, in a Brazilian organization, I'll probably invite you to join the Glasgow Agreement and help in that process, especially as Brazil is a very big country. The inventory is going to be a lot of work. But yeah, I hope I clarified.
Okay, you are all writing on the chat, and it would be really much fun if you like speak, because then we can hear different voices and interact as if we weren't online. But I don't know if Dan is back yet. I don't think so.
Alice, I can take 2 questions just to make it like, I don't know, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
The first one, are the finished inventories already public? Not yet. I guess that they will be by the end of April or May. Matilde, can you correct me?
Actually, the Portuguese inventory is already public.
Yeah. Okay.
And the Spanish one is, if it's not public, it will be really soon. So, and I can search the link of the Portuguese inventory to put it in the chat. But Jawad, you wanted to answer another question, so go ahead.
Yeah, I think the Liz Scarito, she made like really interesting question for me, where you, if I understood well, you are talking about civil disobedience, and this will be very difficult to implement in a very authoritarian country. And I can really talk about that because I'm in one of them, and I'm wearing a t-shirt where my close friend is still in jail from July last year. And he's one of, I know, as Naomi Klein called him, like the environmental warrior. So one of his last work was on land grabbing. So he's arrested, and and yesterday he started a hunger strike. So we're really concerned about his life. And so just to tell you, of course, I mean, we know that, and we know that it's civil disobedience can be much. It will be like practical and possible in some countries in the north, and even we can see with shock therapy, and how governments even in the north are using the pandemic to repress more and to for more repression. I mean, what is going on in France is it's impressive, but still we believe that direct action and civil disobedience is more practical and possible in some countries in the north to stop or reduce or dismantle some factories or facilities, while in the global south or those authoritarian, we have to find other ways of protesting and tackle those issues in my country. I'm done with this question, but Alice, you are facilitating. Sorry.
Thank you, Jawad. Yeah, no problem. I was just trying to follow a bit on the order, so I wouldn't get lost. But thank you so much for your answer. I really enjoyed it. And so
Alice, about the
Alejandra.
inventory, I think that it's important to say that the most important thing is to understand that the inventories are only only a tool to define the climate truth and climate agenda. There is only a tool, not the agenda, not the action. I think in the case of South, in the case of global South and Abya Yala, the route is not defined only by the inventories. In case of Brazil, I think the struggle is constant, and the role of the territory defenders is very important to the climate agenda. That.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. Thank you so much. Yeah, so so also Julia, do you want to make the question that you asked in the chat? So maybe that we can start a culture of speaking.
Is that me you're talking to? Sorry.
Yeah, I think you asked in the chat if we're going to separate emissions. So if you want to ask it.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I wasn't going to kind of show myself, but it's very nice to see you. Yeah, I'm quite interested in the issue of the carbon footprint of the military, because certainly in the UK, where I am, it's pretty big, and we know that in the US Department of Defense apparently has a carbon footprint which is bigger than most of the countries in the world. I mean, it's huge, it's absolutely huge. It's the biggest single institutional polluter. And I just think there's far too little attention on the damage that military emissions do. So I'd just be interested if you were going to consider, separating, because I mean, there's emissions from industry. So for example, industry might be building wind turbines, which is a pretty good thing to do, or it might be building military jets, which is not, in my view. So I just wanted to throw that in. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Julia. That was really interesting question. I think ideally we would have all the emissions disaggregated. And I think that in the national and territorial context where that disaggregated information exists, then it should, yes, be in the inventory. And that's really, really interesting to have that military sector identified in the disaggregated emissions inventory. So if that information exists and if you can disaggregate it, then yes, I think it's really interesting. In the case of Portugal, we don't have that, but I am sure that in other countries where that can be possible. Yeah, thank you so much for that question.
Maybe I can also add a little bit on that, just by saying that, so because you can have disaggregated emissions by knowing that that specific company does that, so produces military emissions, and you can see how much emissions that infrastructure produces or company, and through the climate justice agenda, you can decide to give a priority on shutting down or reconfigure that infrastructure. So because the inventory is just like information, it has no analysis. It's like we're just organizing the data, but the climate justice agenda is where the interpretation comes in for us to analyze the situation around us and to know what is priority to act upon. So yeah, in that case that you were talking about, if you had infrastructures about wind turbines versus military yeah, then I think that would be a part of the climate justice agenda process to choose to give priority to deal with that infrastructure. I don't know if I was clear, but I hope so. Okay, so I forgot to see that Stephen had a question. If you want to ask that question like through your voice, you can also do it.
Yeah, I can log onto the thing.
What? Sorry.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
I was wondering, being in the UK is very good at outsourcing things, and it's one of the leading countries for tax dodges, tax evasion. So I can imagine the people who organise tax evasion and money laundering would also start to look at this and think of ways of getting around it. We already know in the UK that the merchant fleets and the aircraft are actually counted towards the UK carbon emissions. So will your model, your technique, allow the capture of all sectors? So yeah, that's effectively what it is. Have you factored in that some countries will be extremely dishonest, for want of a better expression?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. So talking a little bit about emissions outsourcing, as you also wrote in the chat. So one of the tools of the Glasgow Agreement, the climate agendas, I think will be used to prevent that sort of outsourcing that usually global north countries do, not only UK, we're also talking about, for example, Portugal, through international collaboration and also the commitment of groups in the global north. So they target companies that are from their own global north countries that are exploiting right now other countries in the global south. I can give the example, for example, of Galp, which is a Portuguese fossil fuel company that has a lot of emissions and exploitation going on in Mozambique.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, so I just looked at the time and we only have less than 10 minutes left. So if you still want to, if you still want to say something, you can just do it in the chat right now. But Sylvia asked who makes up the inventories for a country, if the country leaders or climate justice activists. I don't know if Jawad, you want? Okay.
Yeah, I can do that and maybe connect to what Matilde just said. No, of course, I mean, it's activists and it's a people's climate agenda. So definitely it's a completely different mindset than the one who is ruling actually the COP negotiation, where you're right, I mean, Stephen, where people are trying to, to shit if I'm so sorry for that, but this is actually but we are in a completely different mindset. The global north, our cameras and global north are aware that they have to cut much more emission than what we are. We are adopting what we call historical responsibility and capability in defining the share of cut of emission, while in the global south we are not actually it's not the Paris equity check. It's more we agreed that we don't have to no new project for fossil fuel, but for the other projects it's case by case. It depends on how useful for people or for local communities, maybe a facility. So it's a case by case, and I think it's that I don't know if that answer to the latest question. I was in the. Do I answer the question, Elise? Please confirm. I'm not sure.
I think so.
Okay, perfect.
But I didn't pose the question, so.
No.
Yeah, maybe just to add to Jawad, thank you so much for what you said. That also the inventory is, well, at first it is a technical tool, and it's made by activists, by grassroots activists, but we are not aiming to be, like Jawad said, a think tank or to transform activists in scientists. So the inventory will be produced, it will be an extremely important tool, and then it will transform, or it will produce the climate justice agenda, the climate justice agenda being informed by the inventory. So activists will do it, and it's important to say that we are not aiming to turn activists into technical scientists or being a think tank. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe just because it's not really related, but it kind of can be. So Annie asked if actually Annie said that in the US, the inventories would probably have to be done on a state level, not national level, at least initially, and not all states will be willing. Even in Vermont, which is very liberal, it is difficult to get the date we need. This is more like a comment, but maybe we can also say something on our experience. So maybe Matilde or Jawad or Alejandra, if you want to say something on this, because I think it's one of our problems.
You want, Matilde, you want to go
Go,
for it?
Jawad. Go, go,
Okay.
go.
Yeah. No, I want just to follow up on this idea to, we are not scientists. We consider this issue as a political one, and we don't want to be lost in the figures. And no, it's like a more moral and existential. So we tackle this as a political issue. And I like follow my own experience. I remember when I was like 20 years ago, a lot of environmentalists, really authentic one, like honest guys, they were adopting market-based solution, and they were saying that no, we should speak the same language than financial, and we should adopt the credit market, the carbon credit, and the market-based, you know, the clean mechanism development, all those stuff, because to get those financial guys used with our constraint, with our discourse about environment. What's happened now after 20 years, it's like, it's more those activists, or who are activists, who are now adopting the discourse of financial, and they are lost and they forget where they are coming from. So definitely for us, it's important to stick to and not getting lost in so and of course, climate justice is a political framework that we are adopting for global, to try to redress injustice, global south, global north, but also inside northern countries, because we are aware also that the victims are not the same, and those who are profiting are not the same, even in the north.
Thank you, Jawad. Matilde, I think you are with the face. Yeah.
So also about the thing on the inventories being at the state level, yeah, that's totally understandable, because, well, talking about the inventory for Portugal, which is one of the examples, it's a really small country, and so it's easier to do it on a national level. But other big countries such as USA or Brazil will probably have to do something on a state level, and then eventually build on that to actually have the more complete information as possible. And there was also a relevant question on the chat that maybe if I answer can clarify some of the things. For the inventory, we are using official data. So it is data that is provided by government, in Portuguese case by the National Environmental Agency, that each year launches some reports. So we understand also that this is not possible in all countries, that in some countries this information is hard to access, many times on purpose, and sometimes it doesn't exist. But that is fine, as groups can do the territorial emissions inventory with the information that exists, and then pass on to the climate agenda, which is the social plan based on the inventory.
Thank you so much. So we are really on a tight schedule. And yeah, I don't think we'll have time to answer to all of your amazing questions, because there are more sessions coming up and we want everyone to be able to participate in the other questions. But maybe I'll just answer really quick to some more logistical and quick questions. So no, we do not have a link to sign up for the June-July meeting, because the Global Online Conference, because we still don't know if it's going to be in June or July. Also, yeah, small local climate action groups can and should join Glasgow Agreement, of course. And yeah, I think these are the most easy to answer questions. And thank you all so much for coming, and thank you to Matilde, Jawad, Alejandra, and thank you also to Andrew about the tech support. And yeah, thank you to 350 for organizing this session. And if you want to know more about the Glasgow Agreement, you can visit the website, which is there. And you can feel free to contact us through glasgowagreement@riseup.net. And if you are interested in the Glasgow Agreement, yeah, I was going to send that link. You can just click on the link below and then just sign to the Glasgow Agreement and join us on our assemblies and activities and so on. And
let me just add, sorry, that as of lack of time, if you have any question that you didn't see replied either because of lack of time, you can email us at glasgowagreement@riseup.net, and we'll have all the pleasure getting back to you and talking about and clarifying all the questions that you have. We know that the 1 hour is short, and we are sorry that we haven't replied to all the questions, but please feel free to contact and email us, and we'll talk about it. Thank you.
yeah,
thank you so much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Hi, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you for all your questions.